Inhumanoids, the evil that lies within. This is a line from Hasbro, made in 1986. This was kind of a pilot series that went up against a few other shows, and Hasbro decided to go ahead and invest in Gem and the Holograms instead of continuing with Inhumanoids, and well, you can kind of see how that investment panned out, I think, in the end. But Inhumanoids is a really interesting line. Everything's very large, very big scale figures, and has very much kind of a horror vibe, horror sci-fi to it, which is kind of the reason I like it and Supernaturals. And we'll be opening Dr. Derek Bright, who's part of the Earth Corps, which are the team of 4 guys that are the heroes of the line, really the only humans also. The reason his head looks so small is actually that their environmental suits are supposed to be massive. And I think Inhumanoids has one of the best logos of all the toy lines of the 80s. It advertises removable claws that you could take their accessories off and swap them around with the other figures in the line if you really wanted to. The garish colors would really clash quite terribly then, so I wouldn't recommend it. And there's a light piping kind of feature that all the figures and creatures in this line have that we'll see if we can get to show up on the camera well. On the back you can see the character design of this line is really unique. This is just completely bizarre. And this guy is definitely not the weirdest looking of this group. That would have to go to Liquidator, who we'll look at later. And there's Dr. Derek Bright there, codenamed Digger. He's the mining engineer. He's also supposed to be the guy who kind of developed all of their environmental suits, because all of this takes place kind of underground, which is kind of the Earth core being the double entendre there. But here you can see that the suit itself is 9 feet tall and weighs 500 pounds, and that kind of explains why they've got this kind of minuscule shrunken heads. And really, I don't know why they bothered. I mean, they look so much better with the helmets on. So let's open this guy up. The cartoon that accompanied this is really quite good. There's some pretty horrific stuff in there, because I think everybody, if you're familiar with this line, you know who Decompose is, and it looks like there's a catalog here, so hopefully we'll have a picture of him, but he's absolutely horrifying. And since the enemies are all kind of rock creatures and trees and just these kind of eldritch horror type things, there's actual stakes and the undead rising and things getting blown up and actually kind of killed. So here he is. They are pretty big figures with tiny heads, like we talked about. And let's get his helmet on there. Looks much better that way. So he's got some kind of digging apparatuses, so he can kind of flap his flippers at rocks. And they have very little articulation, unfortunately. It's back and forth on the arms, a little bit of play to the sides. I don't know why. I don't think it's supposed to, really. And no knee articulation at all, so they're very solid vinyl. But and wow, the back of him is not what I expected at all. What a mess. It looks more like an alien from Aliens kind of technology merging there. Kind of disturbing. It's like it's kind of burned too. I don't know if it's supposed to be damaged or just the aesthetic they're going for. The paint jobs is not especially clean on these guys mostly either. It's kind of messy. And with an overhead light you can kind of see the light piping on his visor in action there. Looks pretty cool when you get it just right. It's kind of got a Maximilian from the black hole thing going on there. Looks pretty cool. Only other paint app on him here is the Earth Core logo, which you can see on his shoulder. Looks like somebody's ramming a giant wedge into the earth, which they're supposed to be scientists. It seems kind of destructive of them, but I guess when you kind of fight giant horrors from the center of the earth, you live kind of a dangerous lifestyle. So let's take a look at this extra reading material that came with Dr. Bright. Okay, get to see the... Yes, okay, on this side we've got the rest of the Earth core. So there's Augur is the digger, Herc Armstrong is the leader who's got kind of a grappling hook arm. His head always looks kind of like a toaster or something, and Augur's got this weird organic thing going on, and there's poor Liquidator with his head that looks like I don't know, looks like truck nuts, to be honest, and then he's just got giant balls. I don't know, I think Dr. Bright didn't like Liquidator very much, personally. And they had some really, really crappy vehicles in this line. The Terra Scout and the Trapper, which are just big chunks of Hasbro plastic. They don't really do anything at all except roll along. And the stars of the show here are really the creatures. There's Decompose, we were talking about, who had this rib cage that opened and closed, and Granites that were these kind of rock elemental people, and Magnacore, who is half fire and rock. It claims this ice here, but he definitely looks like rock to me. And Metlar, who's the kind of main villain. The trees that don't look like this at all, that must have been prototypes, because they're just kind of screaming here, and they don't look like that. Tendril. These guys, I'll show you the scale here. This doesn't really do them justice what kind of a presence they really have. So here are the four members of the Earth Core all together. Collecting these guys is kind of difficult. I found to find ones in decent shape. You can see Herc Armstrong here has a lot of paint wear on his red parts, and it's almost impossible to find or at least I found it to be very difficult to find Liquidator who's in decent shape, and looking that hard to find a character that looks so stupid is just a waste of time, in my opinion. I've yet to find his cable, because he's got some kind of, water feature on his ridiculously large backpack. It looks like a washing machine on his back. He's supposed to be kind of the chemical expert, and all of their helmets come off so you can see their dopey faces. Herc especially. They all kind of look overly pleased with themselves. So I don't understand why a lot of toy lines do that. These guys are supposed to be these... Augur being difficult. Augur's the best character in my opinion, because he's a real bastard on the show. But I don't know why they always have these action heroes that just kind of look smugly satisfied about things. As much shelf space as these guys already take up with their large size, it only gets bigger as you go throughout the line. Here we've got a Redlin, the Tree People, a Granite, which is kind of the rock guy here, and Magnacore, who is the two halves thing. His ice half, which is allegedly is pretty lame, because it's just a shell for the front half of his much cooler fiery half. Anyway, I've always thought that when you get these eyes all together, you get kind of a weird mashup. Like, it just looks like there's two different ideas kind of coming together here, and I just don't think they look all that great together. But if you have enough shelf space for these, then hopefully you've got enough shelf space for the three main villains. And here we've got Metlar, who's, you can see, is just enormous. He's kind of the big bad of this series, and he's pretty impressive when you see him all one, except for a lot of him is just kind of unpainted, and kind of they put more detail into his head than the rest of them, it seems like. But you can see the absolute massive scale of these guys, and they're an absolute nightmare to collect, because one, they're quite expensive because they are the kind of centerpiece of the series, and two, there's just about always something wrong with them, especially Tendril. They're very thin, kind of plastic, and like the Metlar I have, his head doesn't really attach anymore because of one of the pins here is missing that holds it on, but he gets by. And again, to show the scale of these guys, here's Deep Six, who would be, you know, about 6 feet, and putting these guys at 9 feet, which would be about to scale. And there you have it. A huge toy line, a very unique toy line that just didn't really get a chance to live on. I certainly remember seeing the commercials for these toys and being very disturbed by Decompose. I imagine that's a pretty common story that people remember about these. Very strange character designs, and it's just the kind of thing that's cool that somebody gave it a chance. So thank you for watching.